Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Helen King, your host. This webinar presents British Telecom's adaptation of the demand-driven approach with Orchestrate software and SmartChain solution implementation. The case study shares the results realized from the pilot and full-scale enterprise implementation. Before I hand this over to Laura and the rest of the panel, there are a few things I would like to cover with you. We're recording today's session and we'll post it to our on-demand webinars page. You can visit our website to listen to this and any of our other webinars. Additionally, we will send out the slides to all the attendees within 24 hours. We encourage you to share these slides with others in your organization, and if you have questions, reach out to Laura or myself to set up a discussion. We want to hear your questions, so please post to the chat or Q&A function to the left of your screen. We've left time at the end of the webinar to address your questions. Now let me introduce your host, Laura Ciceri, founder of Supply Chain Insights. As an enterprise strategist, Laura focuses on the changing face of enterprise technology. Her research is designed for the early adopter seeking first mover advantage. She comes to the stage with over 40 years of diverse supply chain experience. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. So let me introduce our panel today. Today I'm joined by Brian Dooley from British Telecom and Philip Ribbons from Orchestrate. Brian, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Laura. So I sit in British Telecom in something called the Inventory Management Centre, and I'm responsible for all of our supply chain planning activities across all lines of business within British Telecom. I'm a certified demand-driven planner and demand-driven leader with the Demand-Driven Institute. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in the UK.
Awesome. And Philip, a little bit about yourself and Orchestrate?
Hi, thanks, Laura. Yep, I'm Philip Ribbins. I'm one of the founders of Orchestrate. Orchestrate's a software company that was established in 2002 to support a range of S&OP and supply planning approaches, particularly around demand-driven. We have got a number of large multinational customers, but we are still privately owned and growing rapidly. We've got a great history in establishing and succeeding with companies and helping them transform their supply chains.
Awesome. Well, today what we're going to do as a format is Brian's going to give us a case study, and then there are sections where I'm going to ask Brian some questions, and hopefully the audience will ask some questions as well. This is designed as a sharing session, so the more questions we get, the better. So Brian, with that, let's tell your story, the demand-driven journey.
Okay. Do I have control of the slides, Laura?
Nope, I'm going to run them for you. Sorry, the platform doesn't allow that.
Okay. No problem. Step on to the first slide then.
Yep. So Brian, you should see a bit about us.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing that.
Maybe a latency issue.
Yeah, I've got the slides separately anyway.
Okay.
On here.
Okay.
So I'll talk to those. So okay, so we're on a bit about us. So really, just to give everyone some context around British Telecom and the supply chains we have in it. Often people sort of assume wrongly that because we're a telecoms company that we're purely focused just on service provision more than anything. But actually we have many and various supply chains. So we have a consumer supply chain, B2C supply chain, supplying everything from TV set-top boxes, routers, Wi-Fi devices, mobile phones, computer capital equipment, etc., etc. And we deliver about 25 to 30,000 orders to consumers every single day. Another major supply chain we have, and where a lot of the case study focuses, is our engineering supply chain. So one of our lines of business, OpenReach, are responsible for building the network. So that's laying all of the cables from the telephone exchanges to the connection points into customers and businesses' houses, and they have approximately 28,000 engineers that are on the road. And we fulfill about 10 to 15,000 orders every day for those engineers, and that's everything from a 2-ton drum of copper cable through to pliers, hammers, tools that they need to do their job. We run our own fleet of vehicles, have about 130 vehicles. For our consumer supply chain, we also deliver to act as a wholesaler, so we deliver direct into large retailers in the UK, and also the returns, associated returns with that. And then finally, we operate a staging and configuration operation where we'll put together complicated pieces of telecoms kit for major corporate customers, typically banks, global corporations, that kind of thing. So that's just to give you a flavour of BT supply chain. Most majorly a big retail supply chain in our engineering, field-based engineering supply chain. So we could move on to the next slide, Laura.
Yep, we've got that. A little history here.
Yep. So again, just to give a bit more background as to the position we were in before we embarked on our demand-driven transformation. So we were developing or in the midst of a fairly typical supply chain best practice program. So concentrating on our demand forecasting, looking at a statistical baseline, adding business intelligence to that to get a resultant forecast, using DRP within our ERP system for the placement of purchase orders, and those purchase orders being placed against the planned demand coming out of the demand forecasting system. Inventory optimization focused on using the forecast error to calculate the safety stock that goes into DRP, and then our S&OP process being developed to look at balancing supply and demand, and quite heavily focused on forecast accuracy, because if we improve forecast accuracy, then our safety stock will reduce. And it's fair to say that program delivered improvements, delivered results for us. I think primarily around governance and control. But what we found was our planning activities are still quite reactive. So we're still, despite having these plans and forecasts in place, we still get the emergencies, we still get the need to break into the production schedule, to phone suppliers up to expedite on a very frequent basis. And in terms of inventory at the SKU level, we seem to lurch between feast and famine. So we'd either have too much of the wrong stuff and not enough of the right stuff 1 month, and then those same SKUs would oscillate between those two positions. So that was where we found ourselves. So we could move on to the next slide, please, Laura.
Yep. So we got a case for change here.
So the case for change, and here really, which I guess I've kind of alluded to already, it was forecast accuracy, and we particularly struggled at the SKU level to get that forecast accuracy in the SKU mix. So at an aggregate level by product family and business unit, the forecasting is not too bad. And the graphs on this page here, just for one particular business unit, just demonstrate the level of forecast accuracy we were getting. So at a SKU mix level, the graph on the far left, the green bars are the SKUs where our error is plus or minus 20%, and typically that was only 20 to 25% of the portfolio. The next 20 to 25% were around 20 to 50% error, but still over half the portfolio, the forecast error is greater than 50% at that skew level, and that really was the big issue we were facing. And again, the spread of that forecast error, it wasn't just all over forecast items or all under forecast. At the mix level, we had as many over forecast as we did under forecast. Although at the aggregate level, our propensity was to slightly over forecast. So from a capacity planning point of view, we're always looking at a slightly too high a forecast versus real demand. So that was where we found ourselves, what the challenge was, and really what the case for change was. So we could move on to the next slide, please. Which is, what's the solution? So I guess the obvious answer, and I guess the answer you get from a lot of the big software vendors is, well, it's obvious. You've just told us what the problem is. You need to improve forecast accuracy. And there's a great quote here from Henry Ford that I think sums it up very nicely, which is, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that, I think, is, BT is not uncommon there. And we're all wrestling with this issue of SKU level forecast accuracy and how do we fix and improve that forecast accuracy. And we took a slightly different approach and said, well, okay, is there a different way? How can we address this forecast accuracy challenge? And our decision there was to move to a demand-driven approach. Initially enabled through DDS&OP. So DDS&OP was something that I'd heard of, read a few papers on. So myself and some of my team went on a training course to understand more, and kind of thought, yes, this starts to make sense. Actually, driving our planning and execution, certainly in the near term and the operational range from real demand, seemed to be the solution, and certainly eliminates that dependency on SKU level forecast accuracy. So we started to pursue that then as an approach. So we could move on to the next slide, please, Laura.
Yeah, so we've got testing the theory with simulation up now.
Yeah. So what we wanted to do was, and I guess, and this is probably been one of the change challenges back into the rest of the business is really test the theory first before we went to share our ideas and what we wanted to do with a broader audience. It kind of really made sense, seemed to be elegantly simple in how it's executed, but there was that kind of, well, this sounds too good to be true, I suppose. So we built a simulation model in Excel, which is quite straightforward to do with DDS&OP, and quite carefully picked a family of products where we had a group of products that were over forecast, a group of products that were under forecast, that we've been struggling with, but that overall at the aggregate level for that product family, the forecast was pretty spot on. And the graph here shows the results. I don't think there's any animation on the slide. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura. So all of the charts should be on there. So the faint dotted lines are the performance, the actual performance on these items. So the red line was the over forecast items, and this is the actual inventory value over time. And what we did was take all of the actual history day by day for these items, along with the actual customer orders we had on these items. So that red line represents the inventory. You can see it's just growing and growing and growing as we continually push to forecast and plan through DRP against that planned demand coming out of the forecast. The faint dotted green line is the group of items that were under forecast. So here we were continually skipping around very low stock or out of stock. Again, then having to expedite, having to speak to the supplier to break into production schedules, associated costs with expediting, etc., etc. And then the blue line is the overall aggregate inventory position across the entire portfolio. So fairly classic feast and famine position on those two groups of items. The heavy lines then show the results that came out of the simulation. So what we did here was calculate some DDM&OP inventory buffers. So for those that haven't yet come across DDM&OP, in about 30 seconds, it's essentially you calculate strategic inventory buffers. Those buffers are calculated taking into account the lead time of the product, any MOQs associated with the product, the inherent variability there is in the demand, and your expected usage of that product. So we calculated those DDM&OP buffers and then just hit them with the actual demand history over the 6-month period that we had to see how the stock position would respond. So what you're seeing here on these graphs is that initial step after 6 weeks is the manufacturing lead time. So there's a 6-week lead time on these products. So the buffers initially will have generated a large supply order requirement, and you see that come into stock 6 weeks later once the lead time unwinds. But then from that point forwards, you can then see the red line, which again is our over forecast items, is reasonably stable. It goes up and down a bit as demand goes up and down, but it's not growing and growing and growing. And similarly, the green line is reasonably stable, moves up and down a little bit as we get, normal variation in the demand, but it's nothing excessive. And the really interesting bit is the overall aggregate inventory position as we look to the end of the 6-month horizon has now pretty much halved. And that was really what came out of the simulation. We found that, our stock is now in balance. We haven't got too much of some items and not enough of others. Our total inventory position has been reduced significantly. We're no longer dependent on a SKU level forecast to push against. So we've decoupled the supply chain from the forecast error. There are no service issues there. We haven't dipped into low cover or out of stocks. And actually coming out of the back end of this is really stable requirements on the factory that you don't need to change. So you're not continually phoning up the master scheduler to say, right, actually, can you pull this order forward? Can you push that order back? And because we're not expediting, the cost of failures disappears, and we get all of that from less inventory. So it's not just about reducing the inventory. There's a massive service improvement. There's a massive improvement in terms of factory efficiency and cost of failure, but we managed to do all of that from a position of less inventory. So that was kind of, yes, it works. We tested it out in Excel. Now let's go and share this with the broader business and start to look at rolling it out on a larger scale. So we could move to the next slide, please, Laura, the full pilot.
Yes. Yeah, we've got the copper cable pilot up.
Yeah. So what we then did was we said, well, okay, let's now pick an entire supply chain. So the one we picked was our copper cable, because this is product we manufacture ourselves. So in effect, it's kind of a tame supplier that we can work with. We do have some bought-in items in there as well, so it's about 115 items we manufacture and a similar quantity that we buy in, typically from the Far East. We calculated the buffers, only refresh them on a monthly basis because this is still all running in Excel, so there was a reasonable overhead to managing that spreadsheet, and we just calculated an average daily usage in ADU just on a rolling 3-month history, and we ran this from April 2016 to December 2016, and the results really were quite staggering. And the graph in the bottom right hand corner there shows sort of the inventory evolution over time. So the red line is where our inventory had actually gone under our old push to forecast ERP model. So we'd progressively grown and grown and grown and grown. And then the blue line is the actual results from DDM&OP, with the green line being the forward projection beyond December when we brought the pilot to a close. So we're actually coming back down to the same level of inventory that we originally started with, but now the mix is completely under control. So whereas under DRP and push to forecast, our position and thought process there was our stock levels are too low, we've got lots of service issues, we need to get more stock into the supply chain. We've come right the way around to take that stock out, but because DDM&OP is using real demand to drive the supply order generation and management, the mix comes completely under control, and we can achieve 99% plus service from a significantly lower amount of inventory. And we took sort of over a third out of the finished goods inventory within a very short period of time, and expedites and breaks into the schedule were almost zero. So we no longer were on the phone to the production planner on a daily, weekly basis, changing the schedule around, which for most production planners is a dream come true. So if we want to move on to the... Yeah, sorry, Laura?
So let's have a chat here, Brian. How did you define demand-driven, and is demand-driven the same thing as DDM&RP, and what is DDM&RP? Let's take these one at a time. What was demand-driven? How did you define it?
So I think for us, demand-driven is being able to respond directly to customer orders. So rather than plan and manage our entire supply chain on what we planned that the customer is going to do, what we forecast that the customer is going to do, is we turn that around completely, and the supply chain is driven by what the customer is actually doing. So we pull through the supply chain driven by real customer demand. I suppose that in a nutshell is what demand-driven is for us. It's becoming more responsive and completely responsive to actual customer demand. I think to take the second part of the question, DDM&RP on its own is not demand-driven. I think it's an element of a complete demand-driven model. What DDM&RP is and what it does phenomenally well, it's the engine that sits there that drives that supply order generation, so be it purchase orders on external suppliers or shop orders to the factory, and also once those orders are in play, the management and prioritisation of those orders. So as customer demand changes, you can use, without getting too technical into DDM&RP, you can use the relative position within the buffers of every single item to prioritise what needs to be done next and what really are the priorities. So DDM&RP for me is a fundamental and vital component in demand-driven, but it's not demand-driven in its entirety, and certainly, as we'll come on to some of the other slides, it's not, we don't need to forecast anymore, we forget forecasting, DDM&RP will do it all, because it will to a certain extent, but you very, very quickly, because that was kind of our initial this is great. You don't need to forecast anymore because that's really difficult. DDM&OP will just fix it. You soon get to realise that actually we still need a forecast. We still need a process to gather that business insight to help us shape and size and position those buffers correctly. But then we can let DDM&OP, the engine, take care of the product mix on a day-to-day basis because it does that fantastically well. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Let's move on and talk about how you scaled it, because you did this pilot and then you had to make it so that it was scalable across your enterprise. So let's continue.
Yeah, so we're on the slide titled The Plan then?
Yes? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is a schematic of once we've done the copper cable pilot where we wanted to get to. And at this stage, this is all still finished goods, so we haven't as yet gone back into our manufacturing supply chain, into work in progress raw materials. So each of the red, yellow and green buckets represent where we've got DDM&OP buffers positioned. So at our cables factory, we have DDM&OP buffers positioned for the finished goods. At our 2 national distribution centres, we have them for both product coming in from suppliers and from the cables factory, and then also at our forward stock locations, so FSL. So these are small satellite warehouses. We have 96 of them all around the UK. This is where the engineers come in to pick up the products that they need each day to carry out the jobs that they've got. And just to give people an idea of scale, the combination of items at all of those locations was about 125,000 individual item location combinations. So that's 125,000 DDM&OP inventory buffers to calculate and manage. So hopefully people can appreciate that's now gone beyond the scale of Excel. Excel is great for a pilot and testing the theory, but it's not a robust, repeatable solution with appropriate governance and control and all the rest of those things that we need for a enterprise solution. So we had to go out and look for a software solution, and so we ran an IPT to find the right partner to work with us and putting that solution in place. So if we want to move on to the next slide, the solution.
Yep, we got the solution up.
Yep. So as I say, Excel is no longer a viable option, and the solution that we chose was Orchestrate. And one of the reasons was it's a SaaS solution. So in terms of quick deployment, it makes life very, very straightforward. I think we also picked Orchestrate because of their long-standing knowledge of demand-driven and DDM&OP, but also because of their size. So we almost deliberately didn't go for a massive software solution company. Orchestrate, being the size they are really, really responsive to customer demands, changes. You're always working with the same people, and that's a process actually that's worked really, really, really well for us. And with the assistance of SmartChain on the implementation, just helping us to think through some of the processes and how they should work really, really well. So we had a kick-off workshop in July of 2016, and we went live across that full network in January 2017. So 6 months really, start to finish, which personally I think is phenomenal, the time frame. Actually, it's a lot more phenomenal than that sounds, because the biggest and longest and most complicated bit was actually our own internal IT development in building the interfaces to get the data in and out of our ERP system to pass to Orchestrate. The actual setup, configuration, pre-go live testing, go live, etc., with Orchestrate was pretty painless and pretty straightforward. The biggest and most difficult bit was actually building the interfaces and working to get the data out of our own ERP system.
So why don't we take a minute here and let Phil talk a little bit about what is Orchestrate. Phil, is this a supply chain planning tool? Is this a DDMRP tool? How would you describe what Orchestrate is?
Okay, thanks, Laura. Orchestrate is a complete set of planning tools that support what we would describe as a supply planning. Within that, as Brian has alluded to, we describe demand-driven planning as part of that toolkit. We support both demand planning and, in the sense of demand pool planning, in the context that the DDI would define it, and we've been doing so since 2002. But we also support a segmentation approach, so the logic linking the supply chain setup from the S&OP process through to detachable setup of the supply chain. So part of that is identifying where to put your buffers and where you're going to use a demand-driven approach, but also where you're not going to use that approach. So it does support a segmented approach in terms of volume and variability and applying different planning logics depending upon depending what is right for a different part of the business or a different place within the business. And then to complement that in terms of the decision making and the supporting of the analysis, we support what we would describe as execution planning, which is the process of seeing what's happening on a day-to-day basis, referring back to the plan that has been saved on the supply side, and then releasing orders or suggestions of things to buy or make across the supply chain. We apply the same logic all the way through the supply chain. The parameters change, but we work in the finished goods distribution and through factories and out to suppliers across the whole network. And our software as a service platform allows us to hook different companies up, different parts of the companies, geographical links and so on, very straightforwardly to achieve that. So I think what we're resulting in is a defined plan that supports a business strategy, places inventory and the planning methodology correctly to support that strategy, and allows networks to execute in a way which minimizes lead time, maximizes service, and minimizes time lost and inventory within the supply chain.
Okay. And Brian, it looks like that you've gone live and you've got some results. I've got your slide up, the go live strategy and the results so far.
Yeah. So we've been live now since March, sort of across the entire network. We were live from a data point of view from December. And then have progressively brought on stream portfolio by portfolio by portfolio. So we are completely live now. Our initial vision, I suppose, was that we would agree buffers with the stakeholders. So that will be finance operations within the various lines of business that we deal with. And then once those buffers are agreed, then we can just get on and plan and execute to those. I guess reality has been not quite as easy as that, because it takes a bit of time for people to understand what that process is. So we've had to put just some initial governance in place, which we've just moved away from now and are moving back towards our vision of, right, well, if we collectively agree and sign off the buffers, then actually everything from that point forward in terms of our supply order generation is being driven by real demand. So why wouldn't we just let the planners respond to that and get on with it? But initially we put a governance step in whereby the supply order being generated was reviewed and signed off, and any insight we gained from that we used to feed back into the model then to help help shape and size those buffers. And the graph there just shows you the results, and this is we saw the same on the pilot, and we've seen the same now across the entire portfolio. So from that go live position, you actually start to very quickly see the inventory come down. We're actually slightly outperforming that graph at the moment. I didn't get time to update the graph for this webinar, but where we are now in July month end, we're actually slightly outperforming that graph, and the projection for the rest of the year is decreasing a little bit further now as we continue to refine those buffers and see that we can take a little bit more out each time, still maintain the service. So it has a fairly quick effect on the inventory position. But what it has done is, which I guess in our push to forecast world is probably masked by the fact that we were either too busy firefighting and reacting to the latest crisis, or our forecast was too high, or the planners had cunningly put some additional into the safety stock, and so we were masking real problems by carrying too much stock. What we've actually found is that we have quite a challenge across our supplier base with lead time performance, but that now has come right to the surface, and is now, firmly at the top of the agenda is what we now need to be focusing on and looking at next. So it's started to I guess, get rid of some of the sacred cows that we had and actually bring to the surface the real issues and challenges that we've got in the supply chain.
So, Brian, when you think about this evolution, what were your major change management challenges and how did you address them?
Lots. So I suppose in two main areas within, if I call it the supply chain planning community. So my team fundamentally, you've got people there who have been planning in the traditional way for 20, 30 plus years. And demand driven is it's a complete paradigm shift. It's a fundamentally different way of thinking. So getting them over the hurdle of letting go of the old ways, and even now we still have to have some conversations where the planners revert to what they would have done in a DRP world, where they go, "Ooh, actually, I'm not sure I need to place that order just yet, because I can maybe give it another week or so before I really need it." That just doesn't work in a demand-driven model with DDM-RP, because if it's signalling to order, it's because real demand has happened, you've dropped to the relevant position in the buffer, and you need to order it now, not in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. So that's been and we've tackled a lot of that with education and training, and BT's been really good at investing in that education and training. I think the other change management challenge then has been with the rest of the broader business, and particularly with the finance community. So, and again there, because it's different, because they perhaps haven't quite understood it initially, we've had to invest a lot of time and effort in bringing them along on the journey to understand the process, to think in a slightly different way. But now that they're seeing the results, and particularly the results in terms of from an S&OP point of view, the stability that we now see. So historically, just from 1 month to the next, in terms of our forward inventory projections, projections of purchase order spend, we could be 10-15% out quite easily. I was looking only last week at our performance based on what we said at the start of the quarter, and we're within 2 to 3%. So they're now seeing the results, and suddenly now, they're one of the biggest champions we have for demand driven within the business, because from their perspective, they can see it working and see the results. I think probably one of the easiest areas that we perhaps thought we might have a big challenge is more with operations, and because and they've kind of accepted it more straightforwardly, because the conversation we now have around forecasting is a completely different one. So it's no longer, you must give me a detailed forecast by item code, by month, otherwise I can't plan. And then every month at the S&OP meeting, we're going to beat you up for your forecast accuracy and ask you why can't you improve. To now we can have a more qualitative conversation about what's the strategy that's going on in the business, what direction are we going in. So for example, fibre connections from a speed point of view, bandwidth point of view, is a big deal in the UK at the moment. But that can be articulated now at a much more aggregate level that we can then more easily reflect in the buffer sizing, just flex the buffers accordingly, so that we put that, in effect, supply chain capacity in place to cope with the demand we're expecting to get, that the business is telling us it's going to get. But then we let DDM&OP take care of the actual execution and what the absolute mix is on a day-to-day basis. So that bit's been actually surprisingly straightforward, because we're now able to have a much more straightforward conversation in a language that's more meaningful and understandable to those guys in the business. So that's been a pleasant surprise. The two big change areas have been actually within supply chain planning and finance.
Well, Brian, I've got a question from the audience. They want to know of how many demand flows and what percentage or volume, if you could just approximate it, did you use DDM&OP for?
So we use DDM&OP probably on 65-70% of the portfolio. Probably, and then the next biggest methodology then is just a straight make to order. So some of our quite slow moving stuff, or stuff that's a lot less sensitive service wise, we use make to order. And we're just starting to look at now with Phil for our spares operations, a kind of hybrid model to accommodate the spares planning.
Okay. All right, let's move on here. So, you also took it to some discussion with finance and operations for sales and operations planning, and let's talk a little bit about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're having a monthly DDS&OP meeting, so a demand-driven S&OP meeting, and here we're kind of setting the policies for our demand-driven operating model, and reviewing. So what Orchestrate's great at is letting us run simulations and what ifs, so we can run what the impacts of those are, and then we marry up to that then a weekly, much more tactical DDS&OP meeting, where here really we're just looking at have we got any buffers that look way too small. We might be frequently collapsing the buffer because actually demand has gone way off the scale that we weren't expecting to happen, and we need to respond quickly now and resize that buffer. Or conversely, buffers might be too large, or we spoke to a particular supplier who's got some issues with lead time. Is lead time going to become extended, and we might need to do a short-term adjustment on the buffer side. And so we're kind of doing that on a weekly basis, so that we're not waiting for a full monthly cycle to track that. But that monthly S&OP one now is much more just about setting the parameters that go into DDM&OP within Orchestrate. And that graph at the side there, I've just given a sort of few examples as to how that evolved over the initial months from when we went live in March. So initially, from the starting buffers, you can see a huge green zone there, which has been driven by some large MOQs. So with our help of our procurement colleagues, we addressed those and reduced those. So that's the kind of policy change that we're discussing. We also had some master data integrity issues that got addressed. And again, lots of these we never realised before, but they just jump off the page on you when you're reviewing the buffers. We then started to look at the red zone and exclude some of the outliers from it and from the demand, so that we weren't buffering to too large a variability. So again, that's a sort of big policy decision, change some of the settings and parameters within DDM&OP. Then we added back in then some lead time variability, because I said that started to come to the surface, and we adjusted our average daily usage rule in terms of what was being driven by forecast, what wasn't being driven by forecast. So that's kind of what's happening now on a routine basis, on a monthly basis with finance, operations, supply chain, procurement, all involved in that discussion.
Okay, now we're going to have to wrap up here, Brian. We're running out of time, so let's move to your last slide. If we just wanted to take some takeaways and next steps, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think the main one is we have absolutely answered the question right at the start and achieved the objective in terms of we de-risked our supply chain from forecast accuracy now, and we've done that whilst reducing inventory and improving service. Almost that supply chain planning holy grail, because basically we're not producing, storing, buying the wrong stuff anymore, which in itself then releases capacity back into the supply chain. I think next steps for us, KPIs and metrics, we still need to refine exactly what we need to measure and look at. And I think the major one, which we're underway with, is engaging with our suppliers now to move the demand-driven principles back up the supply chain into our supplier base, so that they become demand-driven, responding to our demand. And education and development, great. I think, has been absolutely key.
Well, great. Well, Brian, thank you for sharing your story. And you'll be a speaker at our upcoming conference, Imagine, where we're going to talk about redefining processes and driving outside-in thinking. And we appreciate you doing this. And we're going to be talking about new technologies, new process evolution, and we're hoping everyone can join us there and continue the dialogue. Thank you very much. Any last words for the audience?
No, I would just say give it a try. It's really straightforward. Pick a small portfolio of products, try it, and you will be amazed. It works.
Nothing like it working. Phil, any last words?
Yeah, I just think just like to add to some of the things that Brian said. The results that Brian has seen are typical of the results we see. So it's not an exceptional result. This is the kind of result we've seen with all our clients. And I'd just like to raise the fact that from an Orchestrate point of view, it's been a challenging but very interesting implementation. But one of the other benefits, and I think one of the unique things that clients get working with us, is the fact that whilst different planning rules are used, Brian mentioned 60% or so of the portfolio using demand-driven, the planning tool that the planner uses is the same. And they don't need to use MRP, they don't need to use a separate system. So there are also substantial productivity benefits for the planners, and they can operate entirely with one environment. So whether it's simulations, execution planning, S&OP planning, all of that is done in one place and links enable that to scale and to work effectively.
Great. Well, thank you guys very much. Helen, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. And thank you, Brian and Phil. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. A few things to share before we end today. As I mentioned, we will send out the slides and recording link to everyone on this webinar, so keep an eye out from an email from us. We also encourage you to engage with us on social media by following us on Twitter, Facebook, and joining our LinkedIn company page, and following us on SlideShare. You can find the links on the links to this information, on the slide deck. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.